What's up, design family, and welcome back to another episode of Fittdesign TV. So glad to have you back on the channel. On today's episode, I'll be running you guys through my top 10 favorite iPad Pro apps for fashion designers. Yes, I mentioned iPad Pro, but these apps can pretty much run on any iPad given it has the computing power necessary. Some of these apps will be directly related to the digital fashion design workflow, and some of them will be more accompanying apps to do research, apps to project manage, and ultimately apps just to keep track of everything. I've sort of strayed off of the traditional pen and paper path that the older generation of fashion designers take, and I see that a lot of younger fashion designers are looking to get into the industry and are looking towards digital tools and assets to improve their workflow, and really I cannot advocate that enough. So I want to run you guys through my top apps, things that I use on a day-to-day basis as a designer over the last 5 years in order to improve and to streamline my fashion design workflow. Hey guys, and welcome to Fittdesign TV. So glad to have you here. On this channel, we discuss all things sports fashion, graphic design, manufacturing, and technology. We'll discuss key topics, answer pressing questions, and provide actionable steps on starting your own product line. If you're interested in any of the above topics, stick around. You're in for a good one. We'll start off with number one. This is an app that needs no introduction, especially if you're into digital art. This is Procreate. I see a lot of artists use this, but not too many fashion designers. I've sort of taken this app and appropriated towards the fashion design workflow. And I'll explain why I love the idea of digital art so much, especially in this day and age. We communicate visually. If you're working with a client or you're working with someone, chances are you're collaborating in a digital format. What the iPad Pro and what ultimately Procreate allows you to do is it allows you to take these ideas and using the pen, it allows you to digitally inscribe them. It also makes you a much better designer and an illustrator than you actually are. There are a couple of tips and tricks within Procreate, and we can go into more detail in them in a future video, but things like allowing your pen to streamline makes your strokes a lot more professional and a lot more consistent than they would normally be on pen and paper. At the same time, things like symmetry allow you to half your workflow. Instead of having to draw your tech flat on both sides, you're able to just add a symmetrical line and draw across that line. The ability to place reference images, the ability to work with layers really allows you to hone in and perfect your finished product, and ultimately makes you a much better sketcher and illustrator than you actually are. What I love to do is I also like to create templates or bases. And if you guys want us to launch some of these bases in terms of the ones that we use on our day-to-day workflow, let us know in the comments below. But it allows us to create bases or sort of mock-ups that we base our designs off of. That way we're already eliminating 20 to 40% of the work required. It allows us to be a lot more efficient with our time and a lot more streamlined and direct towards getting the job done, which is creating a beautiful design and cutting out all of the fluff work. There are a ton of other tips and tricks that Procreate has to offer in terms of optimizing your workflow, making you a better illustrator and sketcher. We can get to them in a different video, but just know that I cannot advocate this program enough, especially if you're a fashion designer designing in 2020 or 2021. This is a digital age and the tools you use should accommodate that. And number two on the list is the Pantone app. Any fashion designer that has worked translating digital to physical products will know that creating accurate colors is essential. Using a library that is able to translate these colors is also equally as essential. So Pantone is a standardized color library that ranges across different industries and different use case scenarios, whether it's print, publication, textile, or other types of materials, and gives you the most accurate color representation that can be worked with a factory to take your color from a digital screen to a physical product. And the Pantone app that is native to the iPad is great. It gives you access to all of these libraries, whether it's TCX, coded, uncoded, so on and so forth. What I love about the Pantone app is you can search by Pantone code. You can actually snap a picture of a real life image. So take that picture, upload it to the Pantone app, and use the color picker and check the closest possible TCX to that color. At the same time, you're able to swipe up and get analogous colors or harmonious colors. In order to expand your palette, you're able to save that palette and ultimately link it to the Adobe Cloud. And if you want to use that same TCX on Illustrator for your tech pack, you're able to do that as well. There are a ton of different features in the Pantone app that I cannot recommend enough. If you don't have access to an iPad, you can as well access Pantone on the desktop. www.pantone.com, find a color, and ultimately you'll be able to have access to that as well. But it's just a little bit more streamlined on the iPad, and you can integrate it into a wealth of your other workflow apps. Number 3 is Pinterest. When it comes to designing and ultimately getting started, the first step is usually the hardest step. How do you get inspired? How do you get the ball rolling? That's why I love Pinterest. Traditionally, creative directors and designers will look at thousands and thousands of inspiration images, whether it's landscapes, colors, architecture, in order to get inspired, in order to expand their visual repertoire and just get the ball rolling. Pinterest is a digital version of that, and it's extremely highly curated. I don't know how Pinterest does it, but they have such a good algorithm that just seems to give you the pictures that you want to see and gets you inspired in a way that is just extremely motivating. I always go to Pinterest when I want to get a project started, and not necessarily to copy, but a lot more just to expand my visual palette. Having good access to visual references is key, and ultimately design is bred off of other people's designs. We build on each other's ideas and we make them our own and we expand on them. This is the way that the world has functioned for millions of years, and this is the way that it will continue to function. We are the products of the civilizations before us, and not to get too deep, but I am a huge proponent of getting inspired and looking at great creators out there and being able to build and expand on significant ideas and make them your own and push them as far as you can take them. So Pinterest is great. You can build your own boards. You can search by images. The algorithm is phenomenal, and I cannot recommend it enough. We're on Pinterest. Search Fittdesign if you want to get inspired the same way we get inspired. Follow us on Pinterest. Hit us up. Let us know what you think. And number 4 is similar to Pinterest. When it comes to getting inspired and collaborating with great creators out there, I love Behance. Behance is an Adobe product, and it's sort of an online social platform for creators. And what I think Behance does extremely well is it curates great content, and you usually notice that the level or the quality of work that's posted on Behance is extremely impressive. I love Behance because also it gives me something to aim at. If you're just looking at people's work that is below the levels that you would like to achieve, you really have nothing to aim at. Being able to get inspired by creative layouts, creative ideas. Behance is also a visual storyboard. What you see a lot of these projects do is they'll take you through the entire ideation to execution process. It's not just a simple post like Instagram or even Pinterest for that case. They really take you through the entire creative process of executing on a wonderful project, and it's almost a way to see how other people work. It's a great place to get inspired, to get insights into other people's workflows, and ultimately to build a community. I love that for fashion designers. You can also search by category, whether it's advertising, photography, fashion, it can even be illustration. You can mix and match from different disciplines, and you can build your own skill sets. If you'll notice, fashion designers are no longer only fashion designers. You have a mix of great skill sets like illustration, character design, game design that all mix and match into this one overall theme of creating fashion. So I cannot recommend Behance enough. We're on Behance as well, Fittdesign, check us out. But if you're not on Behance, get on there and just get inspired. And number 5 is the Books app. This is an app that's built natively into iOS or any pretty much iPad or iPad Pro that you can buy from the store. And why I love it is, one, it's immediately available. You don't really have to do anything special to get the ball rolling with Books. I would recommend using the pencil with Books. So a lot of these apps, you will most likely need the pencil to be able to give yourself a more handwritten or script feel, just to be a bit more engaged in terms of how you're taking down your notes and how you're absorbing the information. When I submit a proposal or a design to a client, the best way for me to actually get on the same page in terms of the iterations or the feedback process is to actually note down those adjustments myself. If I'm able to run through them with the customer or with my client, I'm pretty much able to get on the same page, to have a discussion with them about it, and they just sink in to my workflow in a lot more of a concrete fashion than if I was just to receive that feedback through email. Obviously, Things are different for different designers. This is just my personal preference, but I do love the books. It allows me to open up a PDF or pretty much any other format that you need. PDF is great because PDF can also be accessed on the desktop, Adobe Illustrator, whatever you need. It's also a great place to mark down on tech packs. What I usually do is I'll take a tech pack, and if I need to correct it for my team, I will go on to books and I will mark through the pages, and that's one way for us to all get on the same page, and for me to essentially be able to have a handwritten or a more analog experience with the digital files. In this day and age, everything has gone digital, but I think that there is an appeal and a benefit to going a bit more analog. And that comes with the idea of writing and scribbling. Yes, it takes a little bit longer, but I've experienced that you do let the information sink in and soak into your brain a little bit better. And number 6 is Zoom. So why Zoom? Number 1, Zoom is easily accessible. Anyone can get onto Zoom. You don't actually need a username or a password to be able to get into Zoom. Someone can send you a link and you can instantly be on Zoom if you just download the application. So it removes the friction. In this world, we work in a very digital format and we collaborate with people from all across the world, whether you're communicating with a client or you're communicating with a factory. Being able to get on a Zoom call is essentially extremely liberating and allows you to get your ideas across in a one-to-one format, as opposed to having to wait for email or having to wait for other types of written or visual data. At the same time, Zoom has a great, let's just say, screen share feature where you can really get into a creative process with whether it's a teammate, an additional fashion designer, someone from your team where all of you guys are working from home, or it's a client, or it's a factory. Whatever it is, it allows you to share your visual thoughts in real time and to go back and forth, and as you're making these changes and adjustments, to be able to call them out and to just have a much more one-to-one relationship with that feedback comments process. One thing that you'll notice is great designers are not only good designers, but they're also great communicators. If you can't communicate your design and you can't go through the iteration process with your client, you're ultimately destined to fail. What I notice a lot of young designers do is they focus a lot more on the craft, but they don't really necessarily focus on being able to communicate, being able to understand human relationships. And that's something that I cannot stress enough. Something that I've noticed in my own personal client relationships, that's the most useful. Being able to get on the same page mentally, trying to absorb their vision is so key, and Zoom is just one tool in many tools that allows you to get on that level. And number 7 is a great project management app called Trello. I've mentioned Trello on this channel before, and there's a really good reason for that. It's one of the best project management apps that I've seen for visually oriented people. There are a ton that are out there, but I noticed most of them are a lot more calendar based, or they're a lot more text based, like Slack or like Asana. With Trello, what I love is you have these visual cards and you can assign each one to a specific project or an order or whatever it may be, depending on how you structure your business. And you can access that card chronologically and add assets to it, whether it's visual assets, PDF assets, text assets, and keep a chronological track of your project so that you can build on it. It's a great way to never forget the small things and to keep the big pictures in mind and to have an overall glance or a view on your entire project boards all at once. Again, the collaboration aspect of it is huge, especially in this day and age where we collaborate with people from all over the world, whether it's your own team members or it's customers or clients or product management, whatever it may be. Whoever's on your team trying to get you to the end goal, being able to get everyone on the same page visually and to be able to update in real time is so essential. I cannot recommend Trello enough. It really revolutionized our own internal workflow in the company, but as a fashion designer, it just gives me the confidence to know that I have all the information I need for a specific project at my fingertips, whether the client has specific sizing requirements or some inspiration images or trims or details that need to be implemented, or emails that we receive from different team members or comments that we have in the same thread. All that can be localized into one space and can build us towards the end goal, which is executing on a beautiful design and creating amazing products. And number 8, and this is not something that's necessarily related to the actual design execution, this is just something more of a mood or a mood enhancer or something that is able to get me into the zone when I'm working, and that's a great streaming app specifically for music. I use Spotify. I love Spotify. I think it's extremely well done in terms of its interface. I've used it for around 8 years. It's gotten much better over time. Also algorithm-wise, it really understands what you're looking for, and it's just a way to remove the friction from getting yourself into the zone and just letting Spotify do its thing and run itself through what it thinks you want to listen to, and 9 times out of 10 it really hits the mark. I love Spotify. I've used it. This is personally what I use, and I really cannot recommend a good streaming app enough. I know some people use YouTube. I'm not a huge fan just because there's a bit of friction there, especially when you're working and you just want to stay consistent. You really don't want to have to think about it. So Spotify allows you to really push that friction out into the background and just focus on getting your work done. Number 9 is Numbers. So obviously I'm an iOS user or a Mac OS user. I use Numbers, I use Excel. It is compatible with all Excel files, but what do we use Numbers for? Well, number 1 is we use it for points of measurements chart. In order to grade between sizes, obviously those gradings are based on mathematical measurements, and I can set up a chart that has all the sizes I need, all the points of measurements I need, and apply a standardized mathematical formula that gives us the measurements between sizes. I'll plug in my sample size, and then I have a full set of graded measurements without having to do anything. So that's one use. Number 2 is we create all of our price quotations, our purchase orders, our invoices on Numbers. It's a great way to localize everything and to keep all of the numbers the same. It has some functionality, and it has all the functionality you'll need in terms of creating equations and calculating totals, whether it's sizes or actual dollar values. So Numbers has a lot of different uses, and I cannot recommend it enough for a fashion design workflow, because one thing you'll note is most people, when they think of fashion design, just think of the creative and the kind of visual side. They don't really think of the back end and the business side. At the end of the day, we are in the business of creating, designing, and manufacturing, and ultimately selling garments. So in order to do that, we need to have our numbers in check and to be able to make sure that everything adds up, and Numbers is just one way of many in order to get yourself on the right track and to get things done in a professional way. So check out Numbers. If you don't use it already, some people do use it for tech packs because you can have cells in there. I don't personally use Numbers for tech packs. I think our tech packs are a little bit more involved. They're a little bit more visually oriented. So we use more traditional graphic design software like Adobe Illustrator. We can go into that in a separate video, but Numbers, if you haven't used it already, you can also create things like a BOM or a bill of materials, which is essential when it comes to taking styles that are going into production, calculating the total cost in order to make sure that you know what your landed costs are, what you're going to be paying for these garments, and ultimately what you should be selling them for. Again, we've done a video on pricing strategies that I highly recommend you check out, but just know that Numbers is going to give you the mathematical sort of fortitude and strength you need to calculate the numbers needed for your fashion business. Number 10, this is not something that's necessarily built into the iPad, but it sort of is, but you do need a MacBook in order to make maximum use of this, or an iMac, and this is Sidecar, available on Mac OS Catalina, and it's a way for you to use your iPad as a second screen. I cannot recommend this enough when you're on the road and you're unable to take your larger setup with you. Just with a MacBook and an iPad Pro, whatever it's 12.9 or an 11-inch, you have a second screen that you can use to have as a monitor or as a board for reference images or a notes board or even a board for a video call with a client or a team member. Having that second screen without the friction of having to carry an extra monitor is extremely beneficial when on the road. That's a wrap, guys. That's pretty much it. That's been my top 10 iPad Pro apps specifically for the fashion design workflow. If you guys enjoyed this more casual video, please let us know in the comments below what you want to see next, especially from this side. We wanted to give you something that's a bit more personal. Obviously, these apps can differ from person to person depending on your preferences and what ecosystem that you're launched into. But I know a lot of people are looking at the iPad as a potential way for them to get into digital art or even fashion art. So I wanted to share my personal experience. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in to Fittdesign TV. Until next time, stay awesome.